Hello and welcome. I'm Don Mecoy. I'm the managing editor at the Oklahoman and Oklahoman.com. And I'm joined today by Chris Castile, who's been covering this particular story, the McGirt decision that happened in July at the Supreme Court, been covering it for months and months. And today we had another development in that story off of that momentous Supreme Court decision involving this Oklahoma's Attorney General. Tell us a little bit about that, Chris.
Well, yeah, Don, what Oklahoma Attorney General Mike Hunter, he's trying to basically get in anticipation of most of eastern Oklahoma becoming part of one of five Indian reservations, which could happen by the end of the year. He's trying to get Congress to step in, maybe take the first step toward restoring the state's right to prosecute in these reservations. He's not asking Congress to mandate it. He's not even asking Congress to actually approve state jurisdiction, criminal jurisdiction in any of the five reservations. What he's asking them to do is move legislation that would allow the state of Oklahoma and one tribe at a time to reach an agreement called a compact that would give the state concurrent jurisdiction at the same time, with the federal government and the tribes over major crimes in these reservations. The Supreme Court decision in July dealt exclusively with the Muskogee Creek Nation. But because of the way the five tribes, their parallel histories, they were marched here forcibly, Trail of Tears for some of them from their southern homes in the 1830s, given reservations in Oklahoma. And none of those reservations did Congress specifically disestablish. They took steps to weaken them, weaken tribal authority, weaken tribal governments, sell the land, to settlers, white settlers, but they never specifically disestablished the reservation. So what happened in the July decision was that the Supreme Court, in basically reaffirming its precedence in this area, said it's never been disestablished, it's still a reservation. That recognition for the other four members of the five tribes, which is the Cherokees, Chickasaws, Choctaws, and Seminoles, is having to kind of go through a formal process right now, but that's expected to be done by the end of the year. Upshot is, by the end of the year, the state of Oklahoma will have no criminal jurisdiction over Indians, over crimes involving Indians in these reservations. And that means as victims or as perpetrators.
Well, and even though this is really just a call for a first step towards some kind of negotiation of compacts, the reactions from the different tribes were not, I mean, they were not uniform in their reaction to what the Attorney General said today.
Right. Nobody came out and cheered it without some qualification. The tribes they are very reluctant, to give up any of the sovereignty that they feel, was never lost in the first place, but that they sacrificed since 1907 because of the way statehood was granted by Congress, and these assumptions were made about their reservations that turned out, according to the July decision, not to be true. So the state has been prosecuting crimes since 1907 in all of this land, even in areas not Indian country, like say that it's absolutely this is Indian land, this is owned by the Cherokees, owned by the Chickasaws or something. Then in that case, they knew all along, we have no jurisdiction here. But that's been a very small part of the state since 1907. So having gotten this decision just, a couple months ago, basically, a few months ago, the tribes are reluctant to have Congress get involved in this all of a sudden and do something that they might consider irreversible. Everybody kind of wants, and this goes for the 7 members of the Oklahoma congressional delegation, they've pretty much spoken with a united voice on this. You come to us, state and tribes, when everybody's on the same page. I don't think they want to get involved in some splinter, some situation where everybody's splintered on it, And that became true immediately after the decision, or a couple of weeks after the decision, when the AG and some of the tribes floated this framework for an agreement on both criminal and civil jurisdiction. And members of the tribes, some of the tribes, especially, vocal were some in the Seminole and Creek Nation, who said, look, don't compromise our sovereign. Don't sacrifice it again. We don't need this. There's no reason to rush into anything right now. And I think that sort of, let's go slow approach has sort of permeated, through everyone in this. But what the AG has seen in the Creek Nation, where the federal government and the tribes have had to start prosecuting all crimes involving Indians, is that federal prosecutors and the tribes are not equipped to handle it right now. They don't have the infrastructure, they don't have the prosecutors, they don't have the jails, they don't have the courts, they don't have anything built up enough to handle this huge wave of crimes. And in addition to the crimes that are having to be investigated now, you've got hundreds of state inmates who are now appealing their decisions based on they're appealing their convictions based on this decision, and the federal government is having to handle those as well. So that just, cascade of new prosecutions and having to take on old cases is about to happen in 4 other reservations by the end of the year. And that's what Hunter is looking out on the horizon and seeing. If they can't handle this in Tulsa, which is where, Creek Nation includes most of the Creek Reservation includes most of Tulsa, which, has some cross deputization, which has a big federal prosecutor presence. How are they going to handle this on the Chickasaw or the Cherokee? These are huge reservations that are, and as Hunter said, there's no reservations like this in America. These are going to be huge in area, but what's also unique about them is that they're going to be 90% white and 10% Indian. So there's just a lot that's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of new roles that have people have had to take on here, that he's trying to mitigate this somewhat by just trying to get a process in which at least the tribes can voluntarily enter into compacts that allows the state to continue some prosecutions, not every single one, but some of them.
Yeah, well, as you just explained, I mean, this could build and there could be more pressure, but it also gets pretty sticky when you're having to do negotiations with 5 different entities who are all going to be looking on everybody else's paper to see what you negotiated. What did you negotiate? Now, what am I doing? So, and with that earlier agreement that fell apart.
Right. That's what I mentioned. That framework fell apart, because a couple of tribes have said, whoa, let's back off of this. And there's no guarantee it ever would have gotten. I mean, it was still kind of like the framework for an agreement that Congress was going to have to draft into legislation, then get through both houses of Congress and get the president to sign. It's not like there was, already this detailed piece of legislation ready to go, far from it. But this is it's such an unusual situation right now, kind of in this limbo with the other 4 reservations, because as I said, it was immediately expected after the McGirt decision. And it's become known as the McGirt decision because the inmate whose case was decided was a Seminole named Jim C. McGirt, whose crime was committed on the Creek Reservation. So it's known as the McGirt decision. So now you have this, but immediately everybody knew this is going to apply to the other 4 tribes, the other 4 members of the 5 civilized tribes. But it didn't immediately. It has to go through this kind of process to get there, where, it looks like the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals may rule, maybe in November or December, yes, their reservations weren't disestablished. So you've got this period in between the decision coming out and whenever the Court of Criminal Appeals makes this ruling, where the state knows that if it arrests somebody now, and it arrests an Indian or or a perpetrator, who committed a crime against Indians, and they try to proceed with this case, that they may just be weeks away from this being taken away from them. And then what happens, but the federal government doesn't have jurisdiction yet. So there's just this, it has just created all kinds of unique situations that these people who really, they're taught their main concern is public safety. That's what they're charged with doing, is keeping the public safe from crime, from criminals. And they're trying to get their hands around this, and it's not easy. They're worried about inmates being released, and the federal government not, having the evidence or whatever to be able to take up this whole case. So you could have, kind of, I don't want to exaggerate, say there's going to be some flood of inmates released, but there will be ones probably where it's difficult for the federal government, for one reason or another, to pursue that case in federal court years after the state conviction, because evidence has gotten old, witnesses, whatever. So you have that concern. And in the meantime, you have the concern about whether the federal government and tribes can handle all these cases. So it's just kind of a confluence of lots of issues,
Yeah,
colliding here.
Yeah, it's a remarkable situation. It's unprecedented. And I will say, Chris has been covering this literally for months and months and months, has read thousands of pages of legal documents, has talked to scores of people, and there is no reporter in the United States who's covering this story the way that Chris is. And so we're proud to bring you his work, which you can see his story tomorrow in the Oklahoman. You can see it right now on oklahoman.com. And as is evident from this conversation, there will be many stories to come.
Many, many more to come.
So I appreciate your time, Chris. Appreciate
you,
your and all your, like I said, grab a copy of the newspaper, or look us up on oklahoman.com to see more of this kind of stuff. Appreciate it. Have a great day.